last week, like I said, there were two major pieces of SCOTUS news. The first was SCOTUS taking up a case pertaining to Trump's birthright citizenship EO. But the context of the case is birthright citizenship and Trump submitting the executive order. The legal question that the case actually pertains to is, like we said before, universal injunctions. And can judges in lower federal courts implement injunctions that are binding nationwide?
I think it's interesting that this only comes up under Donald Trump. When we got maybe 1 million universal injunctions against everything Joe Biden did.
We got a universal injunction against an money laundering law.
We got a universal injunction against the student debt stuff when Mohela, the one that was being sued on behalf, was like, this is actually fine. Like, we get our money anyway.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even care.
They didn't even sue. They were sued on behalf of by some other group, man. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And it's like, universal injunctions have become pretty controversial in recent years. Since 2015, the rate of universal injunctions issued has like dramatically risen to stop things both from Democrats and Republicans. Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, and Kagan have all issued statements in the last couple of years criticizing the use of these injunctions, and multiple justices have criticized them just sort of on the grounds that they encourage like judge shopping. Kagan said in 2022, quote, in the Trump years, Trump won because we're back. In the Trump years, people used to go to the Northern District of California, and in the Biden years, they go to Texas. We are very familiar with legal groups shopping around for judges in Texas to get favorable rulings. And judge shopping is problematic for obvious reasons. However, the bad that it causes, I feel, in this instance specifically, is a bit overstated when compared to like the current judicial landscape.
Well, good things are good, bad things are bad, folks.
Good things are good and bad things are bad. I fuck with the universal injunctions that injunct bad things.
Absolutely.
I don't fuck with injuncting good things. And I think that's a principle that we can all stand on. And I think that this is genuinely a principle that's workable if there was to be universal injunction reform. I feel like it's pretty easy to do reform in this instance and say like, okay, only for like the really bad things can you do a universal injunction.
I feel like,
you can't do an injunction for like the trans ban.
Yeah, exactly. I get to decide when the universal injunctions apply. I feel like and I'm not an expert on like court processes, of course.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's got to be a way, like if a district court wants to do a universal injunction, for SCOTUS to quickly decide, yes, this flies, no, this doesn't fly.
Yes.
I feel like there's got to be a way that they can do that. I know they're busy people. They hear like 80 cases out of like 1 million every year.
Yeah.
But like, there's got to be something that we could do.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, and it's like a lot of justices have like I said, they have problems with universal injunctions as a thing, but it's like you could reform these in a lot of ways where you don't say, in this case specifically, no. Yeah. Because that would have very bad consequences down the line. And by down the line, I mean like tomorrow if the decision came out today.
Well, yeah, because like this is like plainly unconstitutional. Yeah. What they're trying to do.
That's why I say like you could very reasonably do reform to say that only in instances of just like plain and direct unconstitutionality can you implement an universal injunction, and maybe that injunction gets fast tracked to the Supreme Court for review. I don't know. I think people should be doing more of their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, SCOTUS like regularly throughout history issues cases where, or issues decisions in cases where they like set up a new rule for lower courts to follow. It's a common thing the Supreme Court does. Yeah. I feel like they might end up doing something like that here.
Oh no!
But my worry is that they'll just say like no more universal injunctions at all. Every individual has to explain their citizenship in front of a court if they want to keep it.
That's my big worry as well, and that's kind of exactly what would happen if they decided to get rid of universal injunctions.
Psychotic. I mean, we're talking like millions of people.
Yes. It is absolutely fundamentally insane to expect, I guess, undocumented immigrants to have to lawyer up in every single instance of their birthright citizenship rights being violated. Because without a universal injunction, the way that things would play out is that decisions in court would only apply to the people involved in the lawsuit.
Yes.
And they wouldn't apply more broadly. You would have to challenge everything. You would have to lawyer up as soon as you give birth.
First of all, it would cause like a massive bottleneck in the court system with like millions and millions of people trying to contest the fact that the government's trying to take their citizenship away. But also, as I think Ketanji Brown Jackson said, it basically creates a catch me if you can policy. The government is doing this thing, violating your rights, but you only get to stop this violation or remedy this violation if you can manage to catch them.
Yeah.
That is not a world I want to live in.
No.
I don't want to live in a world where the government, if they violate your rights, is only held accountable if you can catch up to them individually.
Yes.
Because I get it. Like, when the government violates your rights, it's going to have to play out in the court system. That's just like the way of the world. But for every single person who has had their rights violated to have to individually argue their case every single time is fucking insane.
And it's also like, the Trump administration knows that previously justices have called into question the constitutionality or whether or not it should just be allowed to have universal injunctions. And that's why they chose to litigate the case on these grounds and bring that as the essential legal question. Because if they knew, if they brought the birthright citizenship executive order, they know that it is very likely, even with the insane makeup on the court, that it would be flat out rejected and they would be told no.
Absolutely.
They're trying to get universal injunctions taken away so that they can precisely get away with it in districts where people don't want to challenge or get away with it in cases where people don't want to challenge. They are actively trying to violate your rights, and they are saying that they want to violate your rights. They're telling the court that they want to do this to get away from having to answer that as like the chief legal question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the argument they're advancing on the issue of birthright citizenship specifically is the sort of like birth tourism, this idea that people come over to the country on like a tourist visa, and then have kids purposefully so that they're U.S. citizens, or, you know, illegal immigrants coming over and having kids here so they like set roots and they can't be kicked out, or at least the kid can't be kicked out, right? That's the argument they advance. What they're saying is that we should be able, through executive order, to change the Constitution in the face of contemporary problems. Never have they accepted that argument for anything else.
Yes.
We have argued on behalf of I'm not even anti-gun.
Yeah.
We have argued on behalf of gun reform because the way in which guns function have changed so dramatically since the time of the Second Amendment. And their argument always is that, well, the original meaning says shall not infringe. They don't believe in anything.
No.
They have no fucking principles whatsoever.
And it's also, you have to consider that if universal injunctions were to be taken away, or if this universal injunction specifically was decided that it was unconstitutional and not allowed, and the Trump administration was allowed to carry out with this catch me if you can situation, the core question about whether the executive order is constitutional would never have any means of being addressed.
Yeah.
It would never make it to the Supreme Court because it would be fundamentally almost impossible. If an individual wins their case and the courts rule on the side of them and that they are in fact a citizen for being born here, even though their parents were undocumented, they're not going to appeal that because they won.
Yeah.
And if the Trump administration loses in one case, they're not going to appeal that because if they keep appealing it up, it's going to go to SCOTUS, and SCOTUS is going to say no.
Yeah.
And then everything that they've done will be taken away. They're just going to take their L's in individual instances and then go to districts where judges are favorable to them and are giving them favorable rulings. And then rights will just be violated without any mechanism of doing a check on the federal government here.
Yeah.
You can't take it away.
That's why it's like, catch me if you can. Because like, okay, yeah, you got me. You get to be a citizen. But I've got these other, 10 million people that haven't caught me yet. And at least I'm doing damage to them. It's like, we talk about harm reduction. They're doing harm maximization.
Yeah,
they're trying to maximize. They can't fully top it out. They can't get every single person. But they're maximizing the amount of harm they can do.
Exactly.
That's the goal.
It's just like, it's fucking insane. And I know that there are other methods that you could do something like this. You could, Brett Kavanaugh, I think, said that you could do a class action lawsuit to include immigrants in this class and whatnot and sue the government, or states could sue. But that brings up other questions of whether or not, like, what happens if an immigrant moves to another state? Then can they be persecuted again? The class actions are kind of hard to do federally now. So it's like, let's not put more barriers in the way of getting people's rights to not be violated, I think.
Yeah, I feel like the thing that the court should be able to do is just order the administration to argue on the merits of the case itself, not on the topic of universal injunctions. I know that case hasn't reached SCOTUS yet. I'm guessing it will eventually.
Oh, it's got to.
But that seems to be the most imminent question isn't on universal injunctions, but it should be on the fact that they're trying to take away birthright citizenship, something plainly in the Constitution.
Plainly, raw rules is written. Come on,
Plain
right there,
text.
man. And it's like, in my view, I feel like the worst thing that a universal injunction does is possibly wrongfully stop a law from going into effect. That may be good while it goes through the possibly years-long process of appeals up to the Supreme Court. That's the worst thing that it could do. You have a good law, say that, I don't know, fucking Joe Biden passed that was universally injuncted against in Texas.
Yeah.
And they have to appeal it for maybe 2 years, and then eventually the law gets into effect. That's the worst case scenario when you allow universal injunctions to reign.
Yeah.
The other side of that situation is you let people's just rights be violated, and there's nothing that can be done about it if you get rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that seems much worse.
I would much rather keep the
right
universal injunction right now in this instance as a harm reduction measure against the Trump administration than get rid of it just on principle because maybe it does some fucky things legally and it may not be the best thing considering how our system is supposed to function. But when we have, once again, such a bad actor in the Trump administration going and blatantly defying the rule of law, defying any of the processes that make up the rule of law, ignoring everything, why would we constrain ourselves to trying to find the most perfect way to run that system when nobody's going to care, when the administration at hand isn't going to care if it's not serving them?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no point in bending over backwards to hold ourselves accountable to rules or how things should be when the administration so plainly will not.
Yeah, all bets are off when we're talking about fascism.
Exactly.
It's the same thing as the filibuster. Like if the Republicans right now said like, yeah, let's get rid of the filibuster and Democrats voted for it, I'd criticize the Democrats.
Yes.
Not because I principally stand with the filibuster. I think it's like a generally undemocratic thing. The Senate itself is like an undemocratic body if we're talking about representation of the people because of the population issue. But we should not hamstring ourselves purposefully when we're trying to defeat these people because the greater threat to democracy right now is not the filibuster, is not universal injunctions, it's the Republican Party.
Yeah, those are like luxuries we can argue about later.
Yeah.
Those are luxuries we can argue about when like somebody not evil is in power.
The assumptions of the system have changed.
Yes.
Like the assumption for the Republican Party is now that they want to install a regime that, forever operates at their behest. And when you have people that fundamentally don't believe in the project of liberal democracy, you can't quibble about these minor procedural things. You got to beat them no matter what. It's
just like the whole argument for getting rid of universal injunctions is that the system is supposed to be designed so that people bring their individual cases to district courts, to federal courts. Those cases are litigated, judges issue opinions, and if something is wrong across the country, those opinions come out in multiple different jurisdictions, and then those are compiled for appeals courts to consider if things go to appeals. Yeah. Then the appeals courts issue their opinions, that those things are compiled to the Supreme Court if a thing is appealed to the court, and Supreme Court has this body of judicial opinion to work off of, as well as their own expertise in interpreting the Constitution to ultimately make a ruling on the constitutionality of some sort of issue.
Yeah.
That's how the system is supposed to work when people, I guess, are being fair and aren't just so blatantly violating your rights.
Yeah.
In instances like this, we do not have time. We are not afforded the luxury of letting people be kicked out of the country and possibly never be brought back.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah, no, the stakes have changed. Like the stakes fundamentally are far higher than they were before. You have to use every tool in your arsenal, even those that like shouldn't exist in a liberal democracy, because we're not right now. We're not trying to like push for progress. We are defending the existence of liberal democracy itself.
I am defending the status quo.
I've got my quibbles with liberal democracy, but there are worse alternatives. And the difference between liberal democracy and fascism is often thousands of, if not millions of deaths.
Yeah.
So there's bigger stakes.
I am both a status quo defender and a status quo attacker, depending on the administration. And that's just how it kind of has to go. What I can reasonably fight for has shifted.
That's right. That's right.
And I don't fuck with that. Look at me. Like, also just look at us defending SCOTUS. Relying on the Supreme Court of the United States and God-forsaken justices on that court to stop fascism right now.
I'm a prisoner of my time.
I am.
And I gotta know, it is really funny that the 3 Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed have been consistently voting against him in all of these cases. Amy Coney Barrett, I did not understand your game.
I never would have fucking guessed that it was going to be the Bush appointees that were the most insane.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what?
Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, fucking demons.
Neocons were cooking.
Like, I genuinely did not expect the fate of liberal democracy to depend on Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch, and for them to make, like, decent decisions.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. For them to be, like...
Jury's still out. We don't know exactly how they're going to decide on this birthright citizenship stuff, but, like, they've been doing better than expected.
I don't know. I feel like I've read conflicting things. I feel like every article that I read about this that isn't clickbaited in the fucking headline is talking about how like justices look poised to get rid of universal injunctions. But when I actually like watch the litigation that's playing out, like there were a couple clips, like the Ketanji Brown Jackson clip. I saw a Kagan clip where she's questioning things. But I also saw a Brett Kavanaugh clip where he's like, say we get rid of universal injunctions. The way the executive order is like written is that organizations have 30 days to like issue guidance. How the hell would you do this? And it's like, in my mind, it's like, oh shit, Brett Kavanaugh, the activist judge?
Exactly.
Brett Kavanaugh, the activist judge, considering things beyond the legal question at hand when it comes to making his ruling? What's going on here? Maybe they are doing lawfare.
No, it's not like they've become allies or anything. I think they're just doing this for the sake of self-preservation. I think they see the writing on the wall and they realize that if Trump can like carve out the system such that courts are obsolete, then they have no power. And what they've worked for their entire lives, selfishly, probably for bad reasons, is basically gone.
And it's like they're already the weakest branch. And I feel like they all recognize that.
Well, they're the strongest branch nowadays.
But
the Supreme Court envisioned as the weakest branch, certainly the strongest branch nowadays. But I think they realize like if Trump can literally do anything without the courts, or if any decision that the courts make that Trump doesn't like just doesn't apply, then they don't exist fundamentally. I just didn't expect them to like be so anti-Trump.
No, I didn't.
When they got their jobs because of him.
I really thought they were going to fall in line.
Yeah.
But I guess lifetime appointments worked out in this instance. Well, actually, no. Lifetime appointments didn't even work out in this instance because if appointments were shortened, I mean, the three ones that are doing good right now would still be there. Mm-hmm. It'd be the Bush appointees that would hopefully have gotten kicked out.
Yeah, no, we can push for Supreme Court reform once we don't have a fascist takeover looming. You know what I mean? Yeah, or once we don't have a fascist takeover in progress.
I'm off my abort the court shit, unless they do a bad decision here.
Well, abort the court when we're in a position to make the court better.
Precise.
But if we aborted the court, I mean, it's like degrowth. I mean, Trump is a degrowth president. Well, but for bad reasons, and there will be bad outcomes.
I personally wouldn't advocate for packing the court right now.
Absolutely.
Right now. However,
I want to pack the court goodly.
Should somebody I like win in 2028, then I think we should really consider packing the court. Mm-hmm. I think it would do a lot of good.
Well, fundamentally, I'm not a proceduralist.
No,
I want good things to happen. Good things are good. Bad things are bad. There is such a thing as the common interest.
100%.
It is what it is, brother.
And while we continue talking about the Supreme Court, we do have another kind of good decision to talk about. Mm-hmm. So the next decision the Supreme Court issued pertains to the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. 7-2? Did I say
baby.
more?
7-2, baby.
7-2. So the Supreme Court decided that they were going to continue halting deporting immigrants under the Alien Enemies Act. I don't need to say who voted against it.
Shout out Brett Kavanaugh. Shout out Amy Coney Barrett.
Shout out Bill Gorsuch. Oh my God. It's good. It's good.
It's so funny.
The two who won't be named, they released a dissent, or I guess Alito penned a dissent where he just got overly technical about why we should let these people be kicked out of the country with no notice whatsoever.
Of course.
It truly fascist shit, truly Nazi jurisprudence, if I do say so myself.
Absolutely, brother.
But yeah, according to ABC, the order only applies to people being held in Texas. However, right now, I'm not sure if it's just those held in the North Texas Detention Center that the case was originally about, or if it's all of Texas. It can sometimes be impossible to find granular information about things like that unless you read the briefs. And guys, I'm not a lawyer.
Well, the briefs are way too long.
The briefs are way too long.
They every sentence they reference 30 other cases that I have no context for. Yeah. It's too much.
Smart people, smart people can't be fascists.
We are tertiary sources of news.
Exactly.
We distill the news from other people that have distilled the primary sources for us.
Yes, and I've looked at 5 secondary sources, and I found one that told me it was Texas. I couldn't find whether or not it's just North Texas or Texas broadly. I would assume it's just North Texas since that's what the original case was about, and they really don't like doing good things sometimes. You know what I mean? They really don't like just saying, also, we recognize it's bad here, let's recognize it's bad everywhere. Yeah. Because I don't understand how something can be unconstitutional one place but not everywhere. Yeah. I don't understand how that's not just immediately precedent that other things have to fall in line with.
Yeah, I think we might have glazed them a bit too much. A lot of what the three Trump appointees have been doing is just kind of kicking the can.
Oh, that's exactly what they did here. Yeah. Notably, the court isn't really taking a stand on any of the issues at hand. They're only saying that these specific immigrants cannot be deported at this moment under the AEA, but they can still be deported under other lawful means.
Of course.
And they really only found issue with the idea that the Trump administration gave them less than 24 hours notice before they were going to deport them.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's
it's just a halt.
It's better than what it could have been, But
Absolutely.
like we said, they're kind of just like kicking the can down the road. They're not fully enabling Trump to do this stuff, but they're not doing much to stop him when they certainly have the power to.
Yeah, they did not rule on the legality of the Alien Enemies Act, like the invocation of it, at all. Nor did they make a determination about how long the Trump administration needs to give deportees to challenge their case. They only said it needs to be longer than 24 hours. The majority wrote, quote, "The detainees' interests at stake are accordingly particularly weighty. Under these circumstances, notice roughly 24 hours before the removal, devoid of information about how to exercise due process rights to contest that removal, surely does not pass muster."
At least due process got a shout out.
That's what I'm saying. It's reassuring that they do reference the fact that these immigrants, undocumented or not, have due process rights.
Yep.
However, I personally feel like it's only in the context of them not wanting to say anything about the Alien Enemies Act.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like a silver lining, but like maybe it's not. It's a coin flip, really.
Yeah.
I don't know. They also mentioned something later on after that quote about how like, oh, we're too far away from the ground to be able to make a determination about how long these deportees need to be given before notice. So they kicked the case back to the ontologically evil Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Evil group of people.
Insanely evil group of people.
Louisiana, right? That's the Louisiana, Alabama, like the part of the South.
I think Texas might be a part of the Fifth Circuit too. I'm not exactly sure like what states compromise it. I'm pretty sure Louisiana is in there. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, famously conservative, quite literally like infamously conservative. It is the most conservative federal appeals courts in the nation. 75% of the justices are given by Republican appointees.
Nice.
So they're conservatives. And I mean, some of these guys are from the Bush era. So you know if we're following the track record of Alito and Thomas, that they got to be like, they got to be off the rock.
I don't know where Bush found those guys. It's crazy.
I don't know, man. Whatever the Heritage Foundation equivalent was back then was just cooking.
Yeah.
And 6 of the 26 justices on the court were Trump appointees.
And they're acting like it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This was the court that always shot down things Biden did. Like, I swear to God, every single time we talked about Biden passing a law, it was, well, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said no. I think I'm thinking Texas's Fifth Circuit, because when they were doing the buzzsaw buoys, I think that went to the Fifth Circuit. And the Fifth Circuit's like, no, actually, the federal government can't stop them from putting razor wire in the water.
Yes, I remember.
So I think that was the Fifth Circuit. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That came after Greg Abbott was like, Joe Biden won't let us murder these immigrants.
Yeah.
He's like, I would otherwise, though.
After, I think he also invoked the invasion clause of the Texas Constitution to say we can put gunboats on the Rio Grande.
Yep. And you people just say shit, man.
People really just say shit. And I thought we were supposed to have laws to like stop that, but
guess not.
Whatever. If there was any court in the country that would find the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act unlawful or lawful, despite the precedent around what is and is not an invasion, it would be the Fifth Circuit.
Certainly. Yeah.
We have that decision to look forward to whenever that decision comes out.
Yeah.
I hope it gets appealed to the Supreme Court and they make a good decision. I have more faith in the Supreme Court than the Fifth Circuit.
That is bad, folks. I mean, it's definitely going to get appealed no matter what the Fifth Circuit says, either the Trump administration or
the ACLU or whoever's bringing the case.
The plaintiff or whoever's on the other side will appeal it up. It'll get back to SCOTUS no matter what. But I hope Amy Coney Barrett wakes up feeling woke that day.
Hell yeah.
And rules on the side of not sending people to El Salvador.
It's just like, you know it's going to come back to you. Why kick the can? Maybe it's a scope question. Maybe I'm just not enough of a lawyer to understand how the law works and how the courts work. Maybe it really is an issue of just like they don't have the authority to make a ruling on that thing in that instance. I can certainly understand that when it comes to the last one we talked about.
Yeah.
But this one was like all based on an emergency injunction. I feel like they could have gone farther if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, the court can really say literally anything.
Yeah. It is the Supreme Court.
It's the Supreme Court. So, I guess we'll see what happens. We are getting close to the end of June. And the end of June is when we get all of our SCOTUS decisions that they've been deliberating about. That's where we'll get the decision on universal injunctions. So it's going to be maybe a terrifying June, maybe a good June. Who knows?
Do you think the universal injunctions waits until June? Or do you think they talk about it? They release it before?
I think it waits until June because what I was reading said they're not going to make a decision until June.
Oh, man.
So I could see us sort of being in limbo for a while. But at the very least, while we're in limbo, birthright citizenship has not been revoked.
This is true.
Because of the existence of these universal injunctions. So We have a little while.
We have a little while, a brief respite, really. We're resting at the bonfire.
Yeah, one thing people really haven't been talking about with the universal injunctions thing, or with birthright citizenship specifically, is that if people come here, say they're undocumented, and they have their kid here, that kid will essentially just be stateless.
Yeah.
Which feels very problematic for the purposes of, being a person in the modern world.
Yeah.
I know conservatives will be like, well, they'll just be a citizen of their home country. And it's like, well, what if going back to their home country means like death from gang violence or something?
What if it's like an asylum case or some other bullshit?
So birthright citizenship, good.
Yeah.
What are the good things about, the Constitution?
I'm a plain text originalist is what I'm learning.
Yeah, when it comes to recently. Good things. When it comes to the
14th Amendment, I'm a plain text originalist.
Morality is a thing, folks.
Yes, it is. You know what? I see things through the lens of ideology. I'm not afraid to admit it.
I am an ideologue.
I'm not afraid to admit that I have a worldview. And too many people pretend that they don't have a worldview and that they're just living life objectively. False.
Yeah, you do have, even if your worldview is just rules as written.
Yeah.
That's not ideology free, brother.
No, it is not.
Those things are value laden.
You cannot separate yourself from ideology, so why pretend?
It's true.
Why pretend? I'm out here. I'm an ideologue, loud and proud.
Everyone's got a worldview, and everyone's worldview portends certain moral outcomes, and you got to contend with that. And for me, I want people to be happy and healthy.
You can't separate yourself from society. Once again, we live in a society. Mm-hmm. We do.
You're trapped here, me and you, brother.
We're trapped in the same thing. Our actions, they have consequences, and they affect each other. Uh-huh. Maybe I'm on Medicaid. Maybe on the ACA marketplace. When I lose my coverage, you're fucked, buddy. It could happen. It could happen in a hypothetical world. But in response to all this, specifically to the Alien Enemies Act ruling, Trump wrote on Truth Social, this is a long one, quote, "The Supreme Court has just ruled that the worst murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and even those who are mentally insane who came into our country illegally are not allowed to be forced out without going through a long, protracted, and expensive legal process, one that will take possibly many years for each person, and one that will allow these people to commit many crimes before they even see the inside of a courthouse. The result of this decision will let more criminals pour into our country, doing great harm to our cherished American public. It will also encourage other criminals to illegally enter our country, wreaking havoc and bedlam wherever they go. The Supreme Court of the United States is not allowing me to do what I was elected to do. Sleepy Joe Biden allowed millions of criminal aliens to come into our country without any process, but in order to get them out of the country, we have to go through a long and extended process. In any event, thank you to Justice Alito and Justice Thomas for attempting to protect our country. This is a bad and dangerous day for America." That was written by Stephen Miller with Trump diction added into it.
Hell yeah.
I swear to God, man.
It's hilarious that Trump appointed a third of the court, and that third is not voting along with him.
It's so gas. Yeah. It's so gas, man.
Also, people keep saying like, "Oh, you want due process for these immigrants?" Well, Joe, there was no due process when they came in.
That's how that works.
That's not what due process means.
Different issues. Yeah.
Due process protects you from the government when they accuse you of being a criminal. Due process isn't something that just like happens to ensure you're following the law. It's not what the term means.
Yeah. Well, actually, they were getting like due process when it comes to like their asylum hearings when they came in.
Something you don't want them to get.
It was just like a long wait to get those asylum hearings, but you don't want to fund the measures to like increase that way or decrease that way and make things run better. You don't want to fund NGOs. You just want to fund Hitler's sons.
Or conservatives will post like a white woman and they'll be like, she didn't get due process when an immigrant killed her, and it's like it's not what due process means. I don't get due process against Gage if he commits a crime to me. I get due process in a courtroom. That's exactly.
I get the due process
exactly because
the government is accusing. They're charging me with something.
Exactly.
So I'm like, I didn't do it because I didn't.
Because he didn't, of course.
Because I didn't.
Because I'm making it up.
And this also just ignores the fact that the Supreme Court said in plain language that they are allowing you to deport people under other meanings, just not the Alien Enemies Act. Mm-hmm. When you're the government, you kind of got to play by the government rules.
Yeah.
Just straight up.
Trump being a little bit dramatic, maybe. If you could believe such a thing.
If you could believe it. Trump over-exaggerating, he could never.
No way. He could never. Take it back.